Welcome to Journey Home to Self. This is a place for you to remember who you really are. Here we find the path to our true self and start living our deeply authentic and purposeful lives that are filled with meaning. I'm your host, Deepshika. I'll be your guide, your partner, and a fellow traveler on this adventurous ride. And along with my guests, we bring you conversations, opinions, ideas, wisdom, resources, and tools so you can start your journey home to self. Let's begin. Our guest today is Dana Inouye. Dana is an empowerment and embodied leadership coach, speaker, and host of the Rewild Your Life podcast. She helps women source their creative energy and actualize the fullness of their potential by activating and harnessing the power of their emotions. She is a mother of 4 and a long-time kitchen dance partier. And if you follow her on social media, you would see her dance breaks, which are so loving, and they always fill my day with energy. Dana, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Deepshika. I am so thrilled to be here with you today.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you because we have known each other from social media for a while now. And you are one person, whenever you show up on my feed, I just have a beautiful smile on my face because I see you as someone who's living her authentic life. I was thinking about this today, that when you see someone and when you've done some kind of an inner work, you're almost able to see whether that person is showing up with masks on, as we all do. We all do that. And there's some people who just show up as authentically. So I just want to compliment you on this, that your authenticity truly shows in your social media and from what little that I know of it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That just fills my heart.
Yeah, and I know that you were having a crazy day today. Your kids are home.
Yeah.
My kids are home.
Yeah. There's a historic teacher strike going on in Portland. We're in Portland, Oregon, and it's Portland Public Schools. First time in history.
Wow.
And of course, I mean, the teacher, I'm in full support of the teachers. But it's been rough. So the kids have been home since last Wednesday. There's been no school. And on top of that, we've been displaced from our home because we have some construction work going on there. There's a lot of things going on. So I'm sitting in a hotel room right now. Just before we got on, I yelled at my kids to get the F out of here. I had luckily I could ask my oldest son is 17. So I asked him to take the younger 2 out for an hour. My other daughter is off with friends. So here we are. I can breathe. I can talk. I can spill all the things uninterrupted.
This is real life, right? This is real life, that we have kids, we have family, we have all the things going on. And that's how we roll. I mean, no shame in our game. My kids one kid is, I think, outside. One kid is watching TV downstairs. I just picked him up from a play date. And I told him, I was like, no noise. Don't make any noise. And I think more than my kids, I have to tell my husband, no noise.
Right.
Yeah. So Dana, I saw that you also started a podcast recently.
Yes,
Right?
I did.
Yeah. And as I stated in your introduction, it's called Rewild Your Life. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about your podcast and what it means to you and what's the message behind it. I would love for everyone to check it out. What does Rewild Our Life mean? Were we wild before and we have been tamed now? Or what does it mean?
Yeah, good question. So I just launched my podcast a month ago. I have 5 episodes that are live, and number 6 is coming next week. And it really, the podcast is essentially about how to thrive because of our humanness, because of our human mess, and not in spite of it. So I love exploring the idea of potential and actualization. How do we go from our potential that's bubbling inside to it being fully expressed and actualized? And the approach that I take comes from the understanding that the path is messy and that the path asks us to uncover and honor like every part of ourselves, the messiness and the sacredness of our humanity, and that therein lies the magic. So the title Rewild and the idea of rewilding that you asked about, it came to me a few years ago and it just did not leave me. Like the idea of like the word wild, the idea of rewilding, it just did not leave me. And so I started getting curious about it. The wild that we want to reconnect to, that we want to remember, that we want to reclaim, really has to do, I believe, with our wholeness. So wild, as I see it, is being fully expressed, feeling alive, not just happy. Like happiness is a snapshot, but alive, which to me is feeling everything. Like it can be curled over in grief, or gaping in awe, or dancing for joy, or surrendering in our knowingness. I think the wild is, to some extent, I think the wild has to do with like our too muchness.
Right.
That is our magic. That is sapped out of us as we grow through society, through conditioning. Like I feel like we all have this like too muchness in us that makes us who we are, that is our gift. And yet it ends up feeling like the too muchness ends up feeling like it's not enoughness when it's filtered through social conditioning. And like I remember when I was 16, there was this guy in my class, and I remember him saying, like, oh, Dana gets excited over the littlest things. And it was the way he said it. The way he said it was like mocking. It was like, there was like this sort of scornful, like scoffing kind of air to it. And I just remember that so distinctly. I do get excited over the littlest things. Like I do cry when watching like TV sitcoms. And now I claim that as my power, as my gift. So rewilding is like a reclamation. And in that sense, yes, it's a remembrance. Like there's something deep and intimate and primal about it, and untamed. It's childlike, it's playful. And I think as we're conditioned and as we adult and as we try to fit in, we amass layers upon layers that start to kind of cloud our creative expression. And that turn into like hiding parts of ourselves, or people pleasing, or perfectionism, or, you know, like if we do this, then we get approval. So yes, in fact, in order to tap into our wild, in order to rewild, we need to remember. Our rewilding necessitates a remembrance of what makes us come alive. It's a noticing. It's like what feels good, what makes us feel alive. And so it has to do above all with feeling free to be yourself, to express yourself, to go after your dreams, to follow your desires. There's a freedom, a liberation, like a liberation that comes with rewilding and reclaiming. And a big part of it is, again, that idea of wholeness, right? It's embracing all the parts of us, the multitudes that live within us. So it's like our dazzling diva, our shy girl, our dark, whiny, tantrumy bitch. Like there's space for all of them. And it's holding this space for every part of ourselves and not abandoning ourselves.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. It reminds me of a conversation that I had with Natalie in season 1 of the podcast. I think I can't remember what episode was it, but she essentially was talking about, you know, the bringing the wildness inside of you. And she said that, ask yourself the question, what did you like to do when you were 7 years old?
Yes.
She loved to climb trees. So she, spends a lot of time in nature now. And the fact that we've actually been tamed, right? So the boy telling you that, oh, she gets excited at the littlest thing. Yeah. How wonderful is that? How amazing is that? But that's not something that we are supposed to do in our world. Like we're not supposed to get excited about little things. I'm writing a newsletter right now. By the time this podcast comes out, it would have been out on my Substack. And the newsletter is essentially called Joy Is Our Birthright. But this felt really fake to me before. it felt like a lie until it didn't. And, I'm talking about how we've been conditioned to think that life is a suffering, no pain, no gain. And we only can access joy after we've gone through so much of suffering. But what you're saying is that when we embrace all parts of ourselves and not deny any parts of ourselves, it's like we stop living as a split version of ourselves, then joy becomes inherent. Joy becomes part of our life. You can find joy in a dance party in kitchen, right? You can find joy in, taking a walk, or you can find joy in playing with your kids or anything at all. And I find that so beautiful, because that was my entire, curve as well. Before I would read this somewhere in a spiritual text or through a spiritual teacher, joy is our inherent birthright. And I would, like, my body would completely deny it because of the social conditioning that we have to suffer. We have to work really hard before we get to joy. We have to have 20 hours of labor before we can touch our baby, right? So this idea that joy is hard made me question, then it is not my birthright. Actually, suffering is my birthright, but joy is at the end of it, and it's a moment of joy. But what you're also talking about is like being present in the moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And noticing how our emotions mingle with one another. Like there's fear and desire, like at the same time, right? There's like we can feel like anger and awe and love and care at the same time. I mean, if you're a mother, you know that we have all, like, the whole spectrum of emotions, and they can coexist and they can commingle. And when we start to know, when we discern this idea that there's this fluidity between our emotions, then we can tap into, right? We can always tap into this other, like, emotion that's on the other side.
Right. And also I love the paradox and duality that, you can be totally pissed at something, but be completely at peace with something else in your life. You can be totally pissed at your husband, but completely in peace with your body.
Yeah.
Or you can be sad about, your best friend dying, or your pet dying, but still feel a moment of gratitude for, being alive or being with your kids. It, like, both emotions can exist with each other. And as humans, we have such a hard time understanding that, because we've been made to choose one. It can only be one. Like, you have to choose one. You're either angry, or you're sad, or you're upset, or you're joyful. But we can't. We're multidimensional.
Totally. And also in our society, we've been taught that, like, some things matter more than others, or some things have like more weight to them. Like, I remember when I was I was doing my graduate studies in New York at NYU, and I was studying Hebrew literature, and I always had these like 500 pages of, like, Hebrew literature to read. And then I also, like, I always loved dancing and theater. And I just remember I would walk through the streets of New York, like 100 blocks, with this, like, Hebrew literature book in front of me, all the way to dance class. And it was like these two different parts of my identity, but one of them was deemed like serious and weighty and important. And, and then the other one was deemed like just like fluffy and fun and frivolous. And I have become very aware of how the conditioning that I had imbibed valued, like, put a different value on those different parts of my identity. And what I have been, like, over the past few years and through my work, what I've been, like, consistently and continuously, very intentionally trying to do is to just disrupt these like hierarchical sort of paradigms, and to bring a merging of the, of all those different parts of us that can in fact coexist. Like the mindset and the embodiment, like, they need to go hand in hand. It's right. Like, we need our beliefs to land in our body in order to create an emotional resonance.
And they have, when it comes to the limiting beliefs, they're totally in our body. That's why, when we if you've been told that you can't write or you can't speak, whenever that opportunity comes, you start feeling anxious because you have embodied those beliefs.
Yes.
The empowering beliefs also need to land in our body. That's why affirmation, just speaking the affirmations never work, because you're only speaking it. They're gonna die at the stem of our brain cells, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have to embody in the body. That's true wisdom. That's embodied wisdom, and that's when we can go ahead and start believing in those beliefs more truly and not deny it.
Yeah.
Something similar, like I said, joy is my birthright. I couldn't embody that belief till I had to unearth what are the beliefs that I have about joy. I don't deserve joy. Joy has to come with suffering. Till I had to like pull the thread on each of those. That's when I could say, oh yeah, it's right. Joy is my birthright. And it doesn't mean that I'll be joyful all the time, but I can find moments of joy in the things that I do.
Right.
Beautiful. And Dana, you talk about a direct relationship between creativity and harnessing our emotions. Talk to me more about that. We live in a culture where we've been told to suppress our emotions. And we've had a few discussions on this podcast before as well on emotion. It's such a big part of Journey Home to Self. But we've been told, check in your emotions, put a lid on it, and that's when you can go and perform better. I think there's been a lie. We've been told about productivity and emotions.
Right.
But now we're discovering actually it's not true. So let's talk more about that.
Yeah. Okay. This is the juiciest question ever. Thank you for asking. It just gets me so excited. I'm so turned on. I actually gave like a whole keynote talk on this recently. So here's the deal. Actually, and before I talk about the deal, let's I'm gonna pose a question. What do you, because I know you have gone through like a whole bunch of iterations in your creative expression and your creative life, right? What do you come up against when you're trying to expand to meet your creative calling? Like,
you mean the emotions that I come up against?
Yeah. And like, what do you feel kind of hinders you or gets you stuck?
Right. So many, but I think I'm going to talk about what is it right now, because that's like fresh in my mind. I think what people think of me, people's opinion of me. That's what I am coming up against right now. Or what people will think of me. And if I dig down deeper, that's got to do with such a big desire to fit in, to belong, to please, to seek approval, to be the good girl, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that so vulnerably.
Of course, such a great question.
So, and it's like it's so it's just so it's so true and it's so valid and it's so tender. Like that feeling is so tender and right. And I feel like it's something that we all can relate to. It's like we come up upon like fears and doubts, like, and disappointments, and what will people think, and is it enough, and am I enough, and like, right, all these things. And that's precisely why that's our starting point. Like, that's where we need to start, is like, okay, tell me more. Let's dig into all these feelings so that we can unravel. Like, here's the simple sort of framework, is that with every creative endeavor, with every move towards creating something brave and meaningful, there are two parts, right? There's the vision, and then there's like the wobbles along the way, like everything that we start feeling along the way of like, oh no, what will people think? Is it good enough? Right. And like going after your dreams will ask you over and over again to hold the vision and to manage your energy through all the shit that invariably comes up, through the wobbles. And if we're not honoring all those parts of us that come up, if we can't be with it, with what is, and move through it, then we can't effectively move through the wobbles. And if we can't effectively move through the wobbles, we can't effectively hold the vision. So the vision is like this, it's whole and it's beautiful. It's like this big balloon. But once you touch it, once you start like playing with it and rubbing up on it, like it pops.
Right.
The balloon pops and it's no longer whole. It's messy. And we're dealing with doubts and fears and disappointments. And those are the wobbles, right? And the wobbles are inevitable because growth, expansion asks us to stretch. It asks us to like rub up on those edges. It asks us to get uncomfortable. And so doing like bold, brave, beautiful things comes with a whole lot of messy, junky feelings that get in your way, the fears, the rants, the shit that makes you just want to curl up and cry. And yet, what if those things that we think are in our way are in fact the way?
Wow.
Because the truth is that we can't move past our shit if we don't move through it. Like, we don't get there by going far and wide. We get there by going in and deep. And when we lean into the mess and start asking, really like allow ourselves to feel the tenderness of it, and just like really lean into that, like our internal emotional mess, into whatever's present and raw and hot and tender for us, and feel it and release it, and start kind of mining it for its lessons, and kind of digging and asking ourselves, okay, what's underneath that? Something opens up on the other side of that. Like, I can tell you that my most like, I fucking got this moments, like just like deep knowingness, came on the other side of the most heartrending sobs. And my most like heart blast wide open moments of tenderness came on the other side of losing my shit with my kids. And my deepest held truths came on the other side of like my motherfucking rants. And so the way I see it is that when we allow ourselves to feel deeply, there's something that gets cracked open. And then there's this rawness that then allows for something equally raw and like poignant and exquisite to enter.
Yeah.
And so much of what holds us back from doing the things that we know we're meant for are just like the very human emotions that show up in the form of resistance. And the paradox is that the things we think are holding us back are in fact the catalysts for our path forward, if we can harness them, if we can alchemize them. And so being aware of this emotional throughway, right? If this like, okay, if I can feel this, allow myself to feel this and release it and harness it and alchemize it, then we start discerning the fluidity. And like we talked earlier about like the mingling of our emotions, like the beautiful paradoxical relationship between them, the ways in which they're intimately and intricately connected. And so in that sense, we're never stuck, and we get to use this emotional throughway to fuel us, to source our creative energy.
That is such an interesting point, Dana. Yeah, it's so like I'm having my own aha moments right now here. First, I want to say that this is so brilliant. Whatever you said, we had Marin back in Tonson in the last season. She talked about the art of allowing. That's a great episode if listeners want to check it out if you haven't yet. Art of allowing our emotions. I call it sitting in the muck as well. And she talks about, I don't know if she mentioned it in the past podcast, but I've heard her say a lot of times that when you're broken, you're open. And that's what I think you're saying.
Yeah.
When you're broken, that's where, the light can get in. That's where the energy to really transmute those emotions can get in. And if I may share my personal example. So, what you talked about, like you can't get past it. You have to go through it. So right now I've been in, I think I just had this breakthrough moment, I think day before yesterday. So as you know, Dana, and many of my listeners might also know that I used to do marketing and sales for entrepreneurs. I was a business coach, lead generation coach before 2 years ago. And I decided to stop that business, and I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. And for 2 years, I've been trying to figure it out. Like, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? I've been almost trying to make the business work, and trying to do it in a new paradigm. And just about 2 days ago, it really hit me that I don't want to do the business anymore.
Mm.
What I wanted to do, always wanted to do. Like, I can go back to even as a little girl and think about this. I've always wanted to be a writer and to be able to express my voice through either writing or through my words, like this podcast.
Yeah.
And as soon as I came to that realization, they were like tears of joy. There was such a big relief that I had to make the business work, because I know what I want to do, but I was trying to make it work in the business sense. And really what I only wanted to do was talk about it on the podcast, the journey home to self, my experience, whatever I've learned, the stages, framework, whatever, and write about it. That's all I wanted to do, and write my book. And there was a relief that, ooh, I can let this go now. I don't want to do it. Like, I don't, maybe in the future this might change, but right now what I want to do is I just want to write. I just want to write. So there was a relief. There was this, joy of being this, fulfilling this little girl's desire. But then came the resistance. Then came this big, huge, like, resistance. Who do you think you are? You're not even that great. How will you make money off this? How will you sustain your bills? All of that. And I sat with so much resistance that I couldn't do the thing that I wanted to do. That is right. Like, I couldn't write. And I was journaling today in the morning, and this is what came, that our ego, we call it the ego or the belief systems, or it wants to keep us safe, and it wants to keep us safe from the very thing that you really, really want to do, because that's like the diamond, the thing.
Yes.
That is your unlimited potential. That is the thing that will open you up to wholeness and abundance and fulfillment and joy. But it's very scary to the ego.
Yes.
And the only way through it is through it. So I was like, Deepshika, the only way through it is just writing. There is no, and this will never get easier, but the only way is to just write. And I just had that realization. So I feel like this is such a synchronistic conversation we're having right now.
Beautiful. That is so beautiful. Oh my God. I feel like you just blasted my heart wide open with sharing that. That is so beautiful. And yet there's so many things there that I want to, like, pick up on, because, like, yes. So one is, so when you said, like, when you realize that the thing that you're afraid of is actually the thing that you desire, right? So that is such a beautiful example of the way that like emotional fluidity, the commingling of our emotions, the way we can use them for ourselves in order to fuel ourselves, right? Because that feeling of that feeling of yikes, oh my gosh, like, ooh, like, that fear, right? And then that feeling of like they are so much closer than we know. The thing that you're afraid to do is so often the thing that you desire. And so if we start looking at it in a way where our fear is a match for our desire, then we can start approaching it. We can approach our feet, like, relating to our fear from a place of desire. And so what if we related to our fear from a place of desire, and then we could flirt with it, and we could let it turn us on, and, like, right now you're operating from this place that feels like really juicy, right? And then we can start being playful with the way that we rub up on those edges and those resistance, like, right? Because then we can do it because of the fear and not in spite of it. Like, everyone says, feel the fear and do it anyway. I'm like, no, not anyway. Like, feel fear and do it because of. Like, how does that change the way that you approach?
So Dana, give me an example. For example, if you were coaching me right now, how would I approach this fear of, what people will think of my writing? And if I go out and say, hey, I'm a writer now, to my family, there's so much fear that I have with it. How do I approach it from a place of desire?
So okay, there's a few layers. One is like, okay, what will people think? Where is that Okay, so that's a question, right?
Mhm.
It's a question, and it has to do with doubt. It has to do, right? Like inherent in that question is some form of self-doubt.
Right.
And so what if we started to really like bring the doubts further in, like just embrace the doubts and ask yourself, the doubts that are in you are asking questions, right?
Mm.
Like the doubt manifests itself in the form of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting? Okay, so let's start asking some other questions. Like, let's, right, once we recognize that the doubt is really just asking questions,
It's just trying to make
then
sure.
we can start, right, but then we can honor it for the questions that it asks,
Right.
right? Yes, yeah, what will people think? That feels really, really tender. And I get to embrace that tender part that's in my heart, and I get to hold it and I get to swaddle it,
Right.
and like a blanket. And then I can ask myself, okay, that doubt, that questioning, it's showing me something that I like, it's showing me something that I value deeply. I deeply value questions. I
I
deeply
deeply
value
value writing. I deeply value
questioning.
writing,
Right.
self-expression. And that's why
Exactly.
the doubt is coming in. It's like almost
Exactly.
like, when you have a precious thing in your house, like a crystal vase or something beautiful and precious, you won't just leave it at the top of the counter for the cat to go and knock it off or for the toddler to go and reach. You're going to keep it safe.
Right.
And that's what the ego and that's what the fear is
Right.
trying to do. It's trying to keep that diamond, which
Right.
is your creativity, which is your art, safe. In it manifests as doubts and fears
Right.
and seeking approval and all of that.
Right. 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 And so once we start like getting at the idea that like our doubt is showing us something that we really, really value,
Yeah.
right? Just like our fears are showing us something that we really desire, right? And so our doubt is just uncovering something that we really, really value. And if we can think to ourselves, okay, well, my doubt is showing me that I value questions, then like, ooh, let's open up some more questions for us. Like, let's just open up a whole other field of questions. And so I think when we ask ourselves, like, what will people think? What's happening is that it's like an outside in,
Right.
right? It's like, what will they think? What will they say? It's like this whole like area of judgment that is like coming from the outside. And so what if we were to start asking ourselves different questions? What if we were to start asking ourselves, well, questions that come from the inside out?
Mm-hmm.
What is inside of me that wants to be expressed?
Mm.
What is inside of me that that is just like yearning to come forth, right? And so once we start asking those inside out questions, and then what I would do, of course, is have you also like not just ask yourself questions, but also like move with them, because the movement, like we talked about, it's the embodiment piece that has to be integrated in order to create this emotional resonance. Is like, that's the sweet spot. And so I would have you like start like moving with those inside out questions, and
Mm-hmm.
let them, and see how it feels in your body. Like,
Yeah.
what is inside of me that
There's one thing that I've noticed that I do. I always go for a walk when I've noticed that about myself ever since, like, I started this, self-discovery awareness journey, that instead of being pulled in the trigger, I just watch it. And sometimes what helps is going outside for a walk, and I don't take my phone, or if I have my phone, I don't have anything playing. It's just in my back pocket, and I just walk, and I let that percolate in my body, rather than just staying in the mind. It just percolates in my body. And I would say 99.9% of the time, I've come back with a renewed wisdom. I've come back with a renewed source of, aha, I was thinking it this way and now it's this way. And that has got to do with embodiment. And if I can't walk, I'll probably dance or, do some tapping or do some breath, anything that like involves body movement.
Right.
Um, helps us to integrate that in our body. So yeah, and that was really beautiful because when you said, what is instead inside of you that's yearning to come forth? Now, I'll directly taking from my example, because then that can give the listeners a really good example of how this all works is. So I told you that I decided that I'm going to write, got really happy with it. All right, I'm going to dedicate my time. I'm going to make time for my meals. I'm going to make time for my writing. So I sit down, start to write, crickets, nothing. I can't write. It's apparently like it's gone. Whatever that thing was, it's gone. So I get into this resistance. And now I'm like, I don't have any ideas. But as soon as you said that instead of having that self-doubt, okay, it's asking questions, now ask, what's yearning to be self-expressed? Immediately I had like, wow, that's a great question. That's a question I can answer. And I can write on that. Like I can write all day on that because it's not about like writing on paper for people, but what do I want to express now? What do I want to talk about?
Right.
So
Oh, that's
beautiful. Yeah. What about you, Dana? Give me an example from your life, if you are willing to share with us, of how you have harnessed emotions to access your
yeah.
creativity.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I joke that my whole body of work, like my movement, my message, started with a motherfucking rant.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Tell
like
me about it.
even before, like even before coaching and speaking and like all the things that I'm doing now, writing was my way of giving expression to my, meandering creative impulse. And when my older two kids were little, I was introduced to blogging, and it was there was another mom in my kids' preschool who had a blog, and it was just like it was a thing that just inspired like the most like envy and resentment at the same time, because it was just so perfect. Like it was so beautiful, and she always had these like picture perfect, like these like images of her girls who in their like matching Hannah Anderson jammies and like perfectly pleated braids, and they were smiling and hugging and loving. Like it was just so beautiful and perfect. And I looked around and I was like, that was not my reality. Like my reality was not so perfect. It was beautiful as I discovered much through my writing, because what happened was that I started this blog, and there's a Hebrew word that it's untranslatable. It's dafka, and it's kind of like not to spite, like in a mean way, but just like it's like I started this blog like dafka because of this other this perfect mother's blog. And it was like I just wanted to, it was like my way of like, I'm gonna show like the truth. I'm gonna reveal the real, the raw, the messy, the honest, the unfiltered. And what I didn't expect is that in leaning into the messy, the raw, like just in leaning into like all the messiness of my reality and processing it, I landed on the magic. Like over and over again, I would land on like wonder and humor and awe and tenderness and relief and clarity, like over and over again. It was like this like spiral of like losing my shit, melting in awe and love, like over and over again. And what I realized about losing my shit is that we can do it in a very creatively effective way. So here's the backstory. If a few years back, I have four kids. Like when they were all young. Like now it's like two older ones, two younger ones, but they were all young a few years back. And I had this burning desire to follow my creative calling, and I'd find myself like, sitting on my bed, like legs propped on a mountain of laundry, and like like nursing baby, like on my boob, and like it's like whatever preschooler, like making a mess all over the place. And I was seeing all these like aspirational messages saying like, fill your cup, mama, like self-care, get a massage, like get a pedicure, get out of your current circumstances so that you can feel refreshed. And like, I just wanted to scream. Like, I didn't want to have to go outside of myself. I didn't want to have to escape the mess. I wanted to be happy in it. I wanted to feel resourced, like right here, right now with what I have. So I went off on a rant. and then what followed after that was that I started looking around at the mess, and I started seeing color and whimsy where I hadn't before. And it's like this idea that when we let ourselves go off on what drives us crazy, it's like this clarifying process that directs us to the things that truly matter to us. So I can say that my deepest held truths, my creative energy, my mission, my movement, in large part has been catalyzed by my rants, like by going off on what drives me crazy. So it's like, right, like, fuck this, fuck that, like, fuck morning routine. Ain't no mama got time for that. It's like, fuck mind over body, fuck high vibes only, fuck like going outside of ourselves when we can source from within. Fuck quantum leaps. Like, courage is created in like small moments of choosing ourselves over and over again. And so all of this has had, like, all of these have become pillars of what is true and essential for me. And so yeah, and so I have like just a way, like, that's just like sort of one example of how, again, like the relationship between our rage and our passion and our truth, right? When we can work with it, oh my goodness, we can like mine it for so many gems, and we can really let it fuel us. And so, yeah, like, ask yourself, don't ask yourself what is my passion? Ask yourself, like, what drives me fucking crazy? Like, give me a rant and I will give you your reclamation.
Right. What am I mad about? Like, what do I not like? Totally. And I feel this totally. And I think that's what happens, right? We keep it under the mattress, under the rug, under the, like, you know, we push it down, push it down, push it down. And then suddenly one day it just comes out. It reminds me of this story that I read in Women Who Run with Wolves, where this grandma, this woman, she loved like wearing beautiful clothes and going out to downtown. She used to live on a farm, and she used to have this one day in a month or something like that. I'm forgetting the whole story, but one day in a month where she used to go to the town, and she did that years and years and years. Her real desire was to probably live in the city and, you know, be a city girl or whatever. And then one day they all came home, and she'd worn her beautiful blouse, and she shot herself. When she was much older, she was a grandma. She couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't take it that she wasn't free to do what she was supposed to do. And there's so many stories, right? Like, you know, so the author Clarissa Pinkola Estes, she talks about how wolves only go on excess killing in a rage. They normally never do excess killing just because, but they do it in a rage. And she's made a lot of comparisons between women and wolves, and women are the same. When we push it down, we push it down, we push it down, and then suddenly one day it all just comes out. And what we're saying today on this podcast is that you don't have to reach that stage. We can learn to harness our emotions on a daily basis. We can allow our emotions so that we have a direct connection to our intuition. We have a direct connection to that creativity. We had that direct connection to that courage. It's not like a tap that you open up only when there's like the pressure is built up and then you open and it flows. But you can have a steady stream coming out of it.
Exactly. And so you said that so beautifully. And that is like the rant that catalyzed my body of work was exactly this. It's like, why are we not doing this by design?
Right.
Like, why are we not taking everything that's hot and present and tender for us and moving with it through it so that we can get to the other side? Like, when, like you said, when we keep a lid on our emotions, we keep a lid on our power. And so why are we not opening the lid? Why are we not noticing the cracks and the light that glimmers through the cracks?
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Wow. Thank you so much, Dana, for being on the show and for sharing your wisdom with us. Where can the listeners find more about the work that you do?
Well, I'm on my social media channels are Instagram and Facebook. You can find me there. My website is danainouye.com. Of course, there's my podcast, which I almost forgot to mention because it's so new to me. But yes, Rewild Your Life podcast. You can find it on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Wow, that's amazing. And I was on your website the other day. You have a playlist for the audience, for the listeners.
I do.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that playlist is?
Yeah. So I have, so this is actually, so it's three playlists.
Okay.
Three playlists that help you move through this shit to the other side. So the playlists are, one is the tender playlist. I think that's what I titled it. But anyway, one is like the music that just like makes you want to like, ooh, it's the music that like soothes your soul and makes you want to cry and makes you want to curl up under the covers and just like, ooh, like just like tend to your like broken heart. And it's, so that's one playlist. The other playlist is like the like sort of like a rage playlist that like just gets you like fired up. And then the third playlist is the diva playlist. And the reason why I have these three playlists actually, and the reason why they're sequenced that way, actually comes from another story of like having moved through to the other side. When I'll just super briefly, I'll share. I was like, it was a morning where I just couldn't. I wanted to show up for my work. I wanted to show up for my audience, for my creative work, and I just wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling motivated. I wasn't feeling that like energy, and I happened to. I didn't want to have to choose between, okay, like, do I just push through it, or do I just like completely not do what I want to do and just like honor the icky feelings that I have, right? Because you could either of those, but no, I wanted like a third option. Like I wanted a way to move through it so that I could show up in a way that felt really good and authentic and like energized. And so I went through the sequence where I let myself just like be like, I was like under the covers, like with this like heart-wrenching, like achy song that I so needed in that moment to just sit with and to just like tenderize my heart. And then from that, I moved on to the next song, which was like, angry white woman music that had me like flailing and like, and so I was just like kicking and flailing and like, ooh. And then finally, the third song was like the diva sissy your walk kind of song that had me like voguing and it was just this like sequence of like all of what the whole thing was like all of like 9 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, and it completely shifted my energy.
Wow.
And so the playlists are there for you.
That's amazing. And I want to say here that I want to say that music is a really great way to transmute emotions. When it comes to matching your vibration with the vibration of the universe, words are actually the least helpful. Feelings, thoughts, music is one of the great ways because it is at that vibration of it's at a very higher consciousness vibration. I'm a totally music girl. I think you know that about me. I love music, and music is one of my ways to feel as well, whether it's sadness or happiness or rage. Do you remember any one song that's on either of the playlists? Just, I'm curious.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, now my mind is like going back. Hold on. Well, there's a beautiful song by the Avett Brothers on the like achy playlist.
Okay.
That's called From Fisher Road to Hollywood. From Fisher Road to Hollywood. And it's just like, oh, it's just the most beautiful, like achy song. And then, there's so many more. But
I don't think I've heard that song, so I'll definitely go and download that for myself.
Yeah.
What are you listening to right now? Is there any music that's inspiring you, helping you rage, feel, or ache right now?
Yeah. I'm leaning into the Aki music right now.
Really? Which
Yeah.
one's your favorite?
Well, I mean, as we're recording, with the state of the world being as it is,
Yes.
I'm really leaning into all the Aki music and letting it help me and soothe me in my hopes and my prayers for peace and coexistence. There's a beautiful there's a Leonard Cohen, it's an instrumental, it's called Tacoma Trailer, and it's just instrumental, it's piano, and it's beautiful. I mean, gosh, now you opened up a whole this is very, like, I don't know when listeners will be listening to this, but this is very, like, pertinent to, this is very timely.
What's happening in the world right now.
Yes. So there is I just saw this last night. It came out of Broadway, like Broadway, New York musical theater, where all the just a whole bunch of Broadway singers came together to record Bring Him Home from Les Miserables, but it's bringing them home to the hostages that have been captured and are held hostage by Hamas. And it is, I mean, it will just bring you to your knees in tears.
And it goes to show that right now there's so much happening in the world, and we are internalizing a lot of those emotions, and there's absolutely nothing wrong in that. Your emotions are valid, even if you're miles and miles away from Israel. The emotions are absolutely valid and radical nurturing, and anything that takes to make sure that you're showing up for yourself. Thank you so much, Dana, for being on the podcast. And our dear listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked this conversation, I'd be so grateful if you could go and subscribe to our podcast and give us a 5-star review. And if you would like to go deeper into the content we share here, check out our publication/community on Substack, also by the name of Journey Home to Self, where I share a newsletter type article every week on how to discover the true selves within us. Check it out, subscribe to it. You can find the link from the show notes. Thank you again for listening. We appreciate you so much.